Hi there, I'm Jackie Handy. I'm joined today by my friend and fellow colleague, really, in the education world, Lisa Richards. Lisa educates people to recover and be more resilient when experience a life change. She has a specialism in grief and loss, and she calls herself, as her business is named, The Heart with Ears. Lisa, welcome. Hello.
Good morning, Jackie. Thank you for such a lovely welcome and introduction. That's brilliant.
That's okay. That's okay. It's great to have you here with us. And so Lisa and I, we're going to be talking a little bit, well, Lisa really is going to be talking a little bit about what grief is and the two definitions that are given in the Grief Recovery Handbook, which Lisa will tell us more about. She's also going to talk through the 6 myths of loss, things that people might typically say to you. And finally today, we're going to have about 10 to 15 minutes together, and she'll be talking about perhaps what you might do or say if you know somebody that's experienced a loss. So Lisa, let's get straight into it. Tell us, what is grief, those two definitions in the Grief Recovery Handbook.
Thank you for the great introduction and the summary, Jackie. The grief definitions that I think are helpful for people to know, because often we think about grief as death and an outpouring of sorrow, which usually makes people feel very uncomfortable and don't want to go there. So they avoid it, they avoid talking about it, and usually they just hope it goes away. And that isn't very constructive, really. So just to say, the first definition is very simple, that grief is a normal and natural reaction to a loss of any kind. So you may think about it as bereavement and death, but it could be a loss of your job. It could be the loss of a pet. It could be actually more intangible than that. It could be the loss of your health, the loss of faith, the loss of anything that is giving you distress and emotional stress that you can't seem to shake, you can't seem to move on from. And that really leads us nicely into the second definition, which is that grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or a change in a familiar pattern of behavior. Now, this is very useful for us because it actually describes life change. And boy, aren't we going through a life change at the moment. Really, in terms of, we've kind of got a world now where it all looks the same, but we know that it isn't the same. So we may have lost our freedom, we may have lost our business, we may have lost our job, we may have lost loved ones. And if that has happened to you, I really, do feel for you. It's the most awful thing to happen, and a tragic thing. And, this is the time when we should actually be talking more openly about it, and grief can isolate people. And that's really what I'm trying to educate people about. So if we are more open about it, then we can recover and we can be more resilient going forward. So that's what I try to do in my everyday life.
Great. And just tell us very briefly, actually, because I've talked about the Grief Recovery Handbook, but what is the grief recovery method? It might be useful for people watching to understand a bit more about that.
The grief recovery method. So I'm not a grief counsellor. Let's just say that. I discovered a method that has been practiced for many years over in the States. It's been over in this country for about 10 years. And the overarching body is Grief Recovery UK, who licenses me the program that I did myself and helped me recover from the series of grief and loss that I felt over many, many years. To the point where it was so cathartic, I thought, I need to share this with other people because I felt so lonely. I wonder whether they feel lonely too.
Right. Great.
So it's a step-by-step program that you actually work through. You understand what grief is, how it affects us, what we do to maybe distract ourselves from grief, and then the tailored bit is really to go off on your own bespoke sort of journey, about the loss that you've experienced and recover from that loss, learn the tools, and be more resilient in the future. That's it in a nutshell.
Right. No, and I think that will be really useful just for people to understand what this terminology means. So thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
So Lisa, as you say, you know, there's, boy, are we going through changes right now. And, you know, those feelings of grief and isolation and loss, I'm sure are quite prevalent for lots of people. Tell us then more around these 6 myths of loss, that things that people might say to you. What's that all about?
It's really something that everybody says because they've learned from other people, from their parents when they're growing up, this is the way we deal with loss. So we say things that are well intentioned. So don't be sad. Well, why shouldn't you be sad? It's the normal and natural reaction to loss. And often they say if your pet's died or what have you, oh, don't worry, you can go and replace it tomorrow, you can get another one. Well, just replacing the loss doesn't deal with those feelings. It
Right.
just gives you a different thing to focus on and distracts us. So the first one is don't be sad. The second one is replacing the loss. The third one is really more about you learning to grieve alone. And by grieving alone, by internalizing that and not letting people see, because it's very painful and very personal and very uncomfortable, then you actually put a wall between yourself and somebody else. So that actually makes it worse in some respects. So that's the third myth of grief. Keeping busy. What do people say? Oh, keep busy, and in time you'll be fine. You know, you'll be okay. So that's the fourth and the fifth. Keeping busy, and in time will heal all wounds. I can tell you from past experience, it does not do that. It just suppresses it and comes back, and worse in some respects, because it hits you from nowhere. The sixth one is being strong. So if you are a parent and you have been in a couple and if you've lost your spouse, people might often say to you, may say to you, well, just you need to be strong for the children, you know, and that's almost negating your feelings. You know, you need to grieve so that you can be there. You put your own oxygen mask on to then help them, help your children. So those are the kind of myths that pervade our society and keep us stuck in this sort of cycle of grief where we can't move forward. And that's the difficulty. I think people don't know what to do with grief, so they bury it in simple terms.
And as you say, you know, that can really come back to bite us, I suppose, and often have much more unexpected consequences to our health and well-being, I'm sure.
Indeed. Indeed.
So therefore then leads us very nicely into, you know, what people can say or do if they are around people that are experiencing or have experienced a loss.
In simple terms, obviously, there are no words that can help a person to express that, what they've lost, you know. So silence is golden, if you remember that. Listening to people, looking at their body language. So if you are in a workplace and you notice a colleague is perhaps more silent and withdrawn, they're looking a little bit tired, they may be acting out of character, then that's a good indication that maybe something is wrong. And if you don't know that they've had a loss, it might just be nice to say, are you okay? And they may say, I'm fine. But then you can see a minute, see if they then say something else. If they don't, just say, are you sure you're fine? And just sort of qualify it and say, because I've noticed you don't seem to be your normal self. And that then is your cue to stop and just see if they would like to speak, because it may be that they do. Yeah. And grievers don't need to be fixed, they need to be heard. So the one key thing, if you can't say anything, if you don't know what to say nothing. Listen, actively listen. Try to maintain eye contact. Not just let them know that you're listening. Qualify what you're hearing. Saying, is there something that I can do, or do we know anybody else that can help? And so see, say, signpost are the things that really are very simple things that you can do initially.
Yeah, and I love that. See, say, and signpost. Yeah, I sometimes talk when I'm doing my diversity and inclusion workshops and talks. I talk about notice what you notice, and that sounds like a very similar concept, actually. You know,
Yeah.
and so often. Uh, I don't know whether this is the same when you're experiencing loss or grief, perhaps, but sometimes there are things that you want to get out, but you almost, as the person feeling that loss, you don't want to feel like a burden onto others. And actually sometimes just to be invited to offload perhaps and talk and have somebody genuinely listen without judgment sounds like that is really can be very, very helpful for people.
Absolutely. Listening without judgment. Oh my goodness, that was my phone. I'm really sorry.
The joys of working with us.
Listening without judgment, and just don't be tempted to jump in and say, I know how you feel, because you don't know how they feel.
Right.
Nobody knows. Every relationship is unique, and so everybody's grief is unique. By comparing, you just minimize somebody else's feelings, and they feel, oh, they're not listening, they don't understand, I won't open up.
Yeah.
You by inviting them to open up and trying to create that safe space, and it may be that you wait until there is an opportunity where nobody else is around, and just so that they feel that they've got your full attention.
Mm.
And that can be so helpful, to just connect with somebody when you're grieving,
Mm.
and share that experience. It's really, really important that we do that.
Absolutely. And Lisa, you obviously, we've all, I guess, experienced a level of loss at some points in our lives, and we must all experience that very differently. There will be many people watching right now who, as you mentioned right at the start, the various different forms of loss that we can experience, that perhaps would want to discuss things with you in a bit more detail, or contact you for advice. How can they reach you? Tell us where they can find you, in your website and so on.
I have a micro website at the moment that's hosted by Grief Recovery UK. So if you go on the main site, you can you can find the nearest specialist to you. You type your postcode in, and I'm local, I'm based in Shrewsbury. So, you can find my details there, my phone number. I am on LinkedIn as The Heart with Ears. I am on Facebook as The Heart with Ears, and Twitter, although I don't use Twitter as much as I should perhaps. But yes, LinkedIn, certainly for business, and it's really businesses and workplace well-being that I think could really do with this program, this step-by-step recovery program, because there are going to be so many employees who are going off sick because they don't recognize what they're experiencing as grief. And we can do something about it, and I can help. So please give me a call, even if it's just for an informal chat. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the world of work will be sure to change, in some cases beyond recognition. So I think it's really valuable that people can find you, and have those kind of conversations to talk it through, and maybe get involved in a program with you if they need to. Lisa Richards, thank you so much for sharing these really, really valuable tips that people, I think, will welcome hearing right now. What we'll do is, when this gets posted out, we'll make sure that any links to you are popped in the comments so that people can find you. Yeah, thank you so much for talking to me today, and take good care.
Thank you, Jackie. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak today, and thank you very much. Hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.